But as regards the comments on the economy made by Okonjo-Iweala, stabilizing, I want to be careful when I use that word stabilizing, because let's look at the parameters. Our debt to GDP ratio is already crossing the 50% mark. Formerly, it used to be about 20-something% in this country. At some point, we had a ceiling of about 40%. Today, it's crossing the 50% mark. So with all the reforms we have done, that they said, oh, the reform was supposed to herald more money for government, less borrowing. We have borrowed a lot more at this point in time with all the reform. And we are seeing the effect of the borrowing on our economy. Yes, we are building up reserves, but don't also forget the fact that we are borrowing. So reserves can be over $40 billion, but we are also borrowing. And we have passed the 50% mark, borrowing to our GDP. That's, debt to GDP levels. When you also look at the parameters, stabilizing, this government has constantly made the argument that, that the Naira is stabilizing, finding the level of convergence. But I want us to introspect and look at that and narrow down. What's the true value of the Naira today? A lot of statistics based on purchasing power parity have posited that the true value of the Naira today should be around 1,000 Naira threshold or thereabout. In fact, the real exchange rate value, some people are saying, should be less than the 1,500 we have. And don't also forget that we are doing a managed float. So this 1,005 something we have is still because the government still intervenes in the market as at when due, but at least the disparity at which they are intervening is a lot different from the earlier regimes we used to have, which was just a fixed exchange rate and we have to defend to a fixed exchange rate, threshold. When you also look at the parameters as regards inflation, we still have very high inflation in this country. But also the inflation numbers currently doesn't even show the picture of what was happening, because based on the former parameters, inflation plateaued at about 34%. And we had to rejig the way we calculated inflation and the inflation basket for the numbers to come down. But even if the headline inflation keeps, going down, we've had some trickle down in the numbers. When you look at the month-on-month inflation, it's another story entirely. The cost of things are still going down. You have a pass-through effect of this inflation into the economy. And that's why when we talk about 1 trillion economy, I keep saying it's practically not possible. See, go and check all the literatures. Fact check me. Check all the literatures. For you to double your GDP in 10 years, you must have about a 7.1, 7.2% growth. So you can go and look at all the literature. That's what all the economic literature say. So when you look at it deeply, we're not growing at that level now. We're 1 trillion economy in the next 5 years. It's going to be a far report. It's good to have hope, have considerations. But also, and in reply to one point you raised yesterday, that we might have big GDP numbers, but the money might not trickle down and the money might not go through the economy. And that brings me to the point of the Gini coefficients. A very uneven society. But have we had uneven society in the past, Vimba? Yes, we have. In fact, Sweden is a classical example. Sweden used to be one of the most uneven society, but how did they do it? To become the level at which they are, they taxed a lot of the rich, worked a lot of wealth distribution, increased wages, increased skill of the workers, ensured that unions became stronger, gave a lot more rights to the people to be able to balance out the economy. And that's why when you go to an average Scandinavian country today, tax rates are on the increase to be able to take money and pressure off the rich. So I think to a large extent, apart from conditional cash transfers like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is talking about, to be able to remove the effect of all of these policies and all of that, we should now have a proper wealth redistribution mechanism where we take a lot more wealth out of the elite class and redistribute it. I know the counter argument the elite class will make is that we are the ones that provide the job. We need the wealth to be able to provide the job. But most of the time, the elites look for safe havens to keep the wealth.